Play ko po yung muna yung yung user group video.
Uh, okay. So time check. It's 7 p.m. and we'll officially start. Okay. Can everyone see the screen? I'll take the silence as a yes. So it's the time of the week where we get to learn different topics. And for this month of April, we'll be focusing the session for DevOps and Security. Now, we have a lot of things to talk about, especially the topics presented by the speakers. But before that, let's first thank our sponsor, Accenture. Now, to formally introduce our sponsor, here's a short video that explains what Accenture is doing and what is it all about.
From its roots as a key port into Asia, Manila has grown into a hub of business, commerce, and IT services for clients across the globe. For over 30 years, Accenture has been helping clients from our offices in the Philippines. Starting from a single delivery center, we have grown to support our technology and operations clients from multiple facilities throughout the country. We help our clients reliably run their business and embrace change, creating enduring value for them as well as the people and communities they serve. Accenture prides itself on innovation. We help our clients bring their ideas to life with next-generation technologies. More than 600 clients across the globe continue to partner with us for functional, technical, and industry expertise that helps create solutions our clients need and build toward our shared success. With more than 55,000 people, Accenture in the Philippines has relied on the combined strength of technology and human ingenuity to become one of the largest, most mature, and diversified IT and business process management companies in the country. As a local employer of choice, we can quickly field highly capable talent to support our clients. We bring in people with in-demand skills and provide support for continuous learning to help them bring value to our clients as industries and technologies change. We are committed to fostering inclusion and diversity in support of our clients' growth. We are leading the way in our global goals to achieve equal representation in our workforce and to create a healthy environment for all people, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, and disability. East and West, technology and operations, speed and scale. All good things come together here at Accenture in the Philippines.
All right. So that was our sponsor for this month's session, Accenture. Now, let me introduce myself as well. I'm Alwin, and I'm a DevOps engineer by profession. So, this topic we're tackling tonight, is close to my heart, and I'm very excited for the topics that will be presented later on. Now, if you just joined the session, please take this career survey, and this will give you a token that enables you to win the prizes later on for the raffle. So I'll, I'll pause for a moment for you to check out the link. It's https talkpu.sh7KAQVF. And here's the prize for tonight's raffle. So here at the AWS user group, every month we are doing our best to produce good content for learning and sharing purposes. So for next month, there's a call to speak. And if you have an interesting topic to share, reach out to us, anyone inside the community through the Facebook group, or you can ping Rafi, myself, and the rest of the AWS leaders, and we'll discuss what you have at the table. Now, here's a section of our heroes in the community that newly got certified from March to April. So we have cloud practitioner Richard Agbay, Reddy Ramos, Ruel Nupal, Denise Escobar. For solutions architect associate, we have John Kevin Lucito, Rudel Castro. For AWS certified developer associate, we have Ricardo Palma, Raymart Canuel. Then we have the AWS certified solutions architect professional. We have Shad Pabalan, Jobet Agulan, Sir Batoto. And for the security specialty, we have Kevin Obando. Lastly, we have our very own Diwa Del Mundo, who collected, earned 12 AWS certificate. Um, and the latest one was for Alexa Skill Builder. So we have free AWS practitioner exam via AWS Certified Challenge. Please take note of the link below so that you can avail for the free practitioner exam. So https pages.awscloud.com, take the challenge groups.html. Now we also have another program, which is the um, free May AWS CCP tutorial group. You can reach out the organizer for this. I believe it's Rafi via the FB group announcement for details. Also, check out our AWS store merchandise. There's a lot of good stuff in there. So that's store.awsug.ph. Send it a gift. Now, going to the main track. We have 3 speakers for tonight. First speaker will be Ren Pineda from Accenture. Now, Ren is a DevOps engineer from Accenture for almost 5 years. He has worked on DevOps implementation, assessment, and architecting with clients in industries such as merchandising, nonprofit, and more recently, financial services and lifestyle clients. With platforms spanning web app development, AWS and Oracle Cloud, and more recently, data-centric platforms. He holds associate certification in Kubernetes administration, AWS SysOps administration, and Accenture's technical architecture program, and recently was granted a US patent for an innovation of which he is one of the inventors. Now, without further ado, I'll give up the floor to Ren and everyone else. Enjoy.
Hi, good evening. Thanks, Alvin, for that introduction. Can you please confirm if you can hear me? Is my audio okay?
Yeah.
All right, I'll take the screen and share my slides. Can you see my slides now?
Yep, Ren, we can see it.
All right. Yeah, once again, thank you, Alwin, for that introduction. Um, It was actually my first time seeing that marketing video for Accenture, and I'm quite feeling pressured right now because it was somehow setting expectations for what I could bring in this topic. And given that this is my first time doing or joining the AWS meetup in this user group Philippines, I consider myself very very lucky because my first time joining is actually more about sharing my experiences instead of the usual joining the webinar as participant or regular participant. So yeah, let me take this time to thank the group AWSUG.PH for reaching out to Accenture and having the opportunity find its way to me to at least share the little experience I have on DevOps and AWS. Okay, so yeah, I am a DevOps engineer in AWS. Alwin said earlier that he is a DevOps engineer, so I guess most of the things that I'll be speaking about in this talk will be near and dear to his heart, and I guess for the rest of the group here, no, since cloud is basically a key enabler of DevOps. So for tonight, I will be sharing mostly the experience I had with a client. It's a nonprofit organization and their road to adopting DevOps or implementing DevOps in their team or in their software development process. So, a brief background on the application of the client. It's written on Node.js and hosted in AWS. But what I saw when I rolled into that engagement, or I started the engagement with the said nonprofit organization, is that most of the processes or steps that are being executed in their development is manual or ad hoc, if you may say. And yeah, at this point, I won't say what year this was when I started working for this client. Um, I have practically no experience in AWS, so I consider it actually as a good opportunity, a great experience for me to get exposed to the technologies. And yeah, as we may all know, we learn the most when we are not in our comfort zones. So in this slide, I'm just trying to show you the flow that I discovered or encountered when I rolled into the project. Basically, the developers are pushing their source code into GitHub. This is Node.js source code, by the way. And the only automation I can say, or the part where it's somehow streamlined, if we can consider it streamlined, is the execution of deployment scripts when they are doing releases to the production environment. So this deployment script mainly does the compilation and packaging of the application to a zip file that will be ready or be deployed to Elastic Beanstalk, since AWS Elastic Beanstalk is their um, deployment platform of choice. So yeah, given that, the deployment script, of course, must be executed in an environment that has AWS CLI access, programmatic access to the Beanstalk SDKs or APIs. Yeah, but practically that covers all the steps they need in deploying to production. So this just speaks about the production deployment, but um, behind the scenes, the development process, their testing prior to doing production releases are heavily manual. They don't do deployment scripts. They manually upload the package to AWS Elastic Beanstalk. So for the benefit of those who are not familiar with the Beanstalk service, it's basically some sort of a PaaS or platform as a service in AWS, wherein it just accepts the package um, of the application and allows you to select what platform you're trying to host your application in. So in this case, it's a Node.js application. Um, it's tiered into two applications in Beanstalk, and one for the front end, one for the back end APIs. So when I began doing the implementation of DevOps, I mainly followed or uh, first targeted the challenges that are being faced by the client, and in turn these will be the things that I will be targeting to solve, right? First of which is there's very little room for scalability, no? Given that the deployment script is executed in a single server in a bastion host, wherein most of the executions, most of the commands are tightly coupled in the deployment script, it's very, very hard to scale in the future, given that they're trying to build or engineer a modern application, right? And in conjunction, there's a lot of room for error given the tightly coupled executions of commands in that deployment script. The shell scripts also do not provide logs by default. Normally, shell scripts are written for a specific task, but the steps inside the script as mentioned earlier, tightly coupled in one execution. So if one stage or step in the script fails in the process, in essence, the whole execution fails. Also, the last challenge that I was able to identify in their current process back then is there's very little feedback that comes or that goes to the developers for improvement in the future. There are no alerting mechanisms in the actual build process. There's very little visibility given that there are no logs being produced by the deployment script. And yeah, somehow in terms of maturity, if we talk about maturity at an enterprise level, it's very, very ad hoc. It's not repeatable. It also is not optimized. So yeah, the first step, I guess, in having the client adopt DevOps is first we got to provision tools and identify what the quick wins are. In Accenture, we have what we call the Accenture DevOps platform. Actually, it's a tool stack wherein most recommended tools, these are open source, are already pre-configured. It's a one-time execution of a stack and provisioning of tools, all of which will be hosted in AWS. So once we got that ready, we immediately jumped right into the scripting and creating of Jenkins pipelines. So if you notice here in the block that is under Jenkins, it's not really a very mature DevOps pipeline per se, because when we do DevOps in Accenture, we don't do it overnight. Uh, we usually do it by increments or by phases. And most of the time, we identify the quick wins, which will give the client greater value in the long run. So the quick wins that I had identified for this specific client is to mainly automate the build, right? To give immediate feedback to the developer so that whenever they push code to GitHub, which is by the way their code repository management tool, they will immediately see if any bugs that if any code that they introduce in the master copy of the code has introduced any bug. And in conjunction with the build automation, I also enabled code analysis using SonarQube. We're using the open source edition of SonarQube that is part of the ADOP or the Accenture DevOps platform, by the way, to again enable this quick win, which gives the developers or the product owner some sort of feedback, with regards to the quality of the code, if it's up to standard, if there are vulnerabilities or old licenses that are being used by the developers. Now, since the platform of choice for the deployment and hosting of the application is Elastic Beanstalk, I needed to integrate the AWS APIs from Jenkins. So the way we did it was vanilla installation of AWS CLI, configuration of secret and access keys so that Jenkins will be able to communicate and invoke services in AWS, particularly Elastic Beanstalk. So yeah, in a nutshell, Jenkins does the block of automation once the developers push their code to GitHub. The pipeline is being triggered automatically to check if the code is buildable, if it's something that can be compiled, if there are no practices or coding codes that have been done that are not up to standard using SolidCube. And then the actual packaging of the source code is all done using Jenkins because, as I mentioned earlier, Beanstalk only accepts a typical zip file or package for you to be able to deploy your application, and the rest will be managed by Beanstalk. So you just configure a set of settings or combination of infrastructure configurations, whether you want it to be load balanced or highly available. Yeah. How many servers do you want auto scaling enabled? So Elastic Beanstalk fully manages that to you. Yeah, fast forward, I guess the next step or the next phase that we did is the scaling and increasing the scope of the automation or the DevOps implementation. At this point, I was already able to achieve my associate certification as a sysops admin. So in a way, I kind of have bragging rights now. And whenever we have client meetings and they ask for recommendations, I somehow have that confidence to suggest solutions and take part in the architecting of the applications. And I do believe that that certification or that level of training greatly helped me implement DevOps or scale our DevOps implementation with the growth of the application, since I think it was just a couple of years ago when the client explored or ventured into serverless APIs using AWS Lambda. Now, since the quick wins have been established right in the beginning, which is the establishment of the DevOps platform, automating the deployment of Lambda functions to AWS, I would say have been fairly easy, no? Since we abstracted the part of setup, we just needed to create the YAML files for the Lambda configurations and have Jenkins invoke the Lambda APIs from AWS to be able to deploy the Lambda functions. Um, yeah, so if you can see, most of the implementation or the DevOps enhancements that we do in this that I did in this client are divided or are staggered in specific phases. No, and yeah, immediately following this is the part where we do continuous improvement. No? Because continuous improvement is a core part of doing DevOps, and this part, having an automation that stores Docker image to ECR, was in particular a solution that I myself created for the challenge of doing integration testing in the client's environments. So given that they only have one dev environment, and most of the time the QA team is using that dev environment for rigorous testing, we don't want to disturb or interrupt their testing with automated deployments every now and then. So what I suggested to the client or to the dev team is to have the microservices deployed using Docker, and have Jenkins build the Docker image itself instead of the developers relying on their network, relying on their laptop's resources to build a Docker image. So yeah, Jenkins handles the build of the Docker image, and then in turn, the dev team, the concerned developers that need to test integration testing, at least in their local machines, will be able to pull that Docker image from Elastic Container Registry in AWS, and they won't have to disturb the ongoing quality assurance tests in the dev environment. So yeah, at this point, most of the solutions or implementations are a combination of continuous improvements, seeing the application grow from typical application deployed in the cloud to using emerging technologies such as serverless, no, and API gateways. So given that, in a way, we can see that from a typical Elastic Beanstalk application, somehow we can say that the tool stack is maturing. We are I choose to recommend services in AWS that will allow the client to extend their governance capabilities, particularly AWS config, to see if the infrastructure is up to standard, if there are no best practices that are not being followed. No? So AWS config mainly does the scanning of the entire infrastructure. It may email you or alert you if there are, say, security groups or firewalls that are containing protocols or ports that are open to the public, which should not be in the first place. No? Some elastic load balancers, which are not in use since the client is using agile methodology and doing POCs every now and then. So, yeah, the infrastructure is being scanned Some factors regarding cost optimization, of course, are also being targeted using AWS config. On top of that, we're also using Trusted Advisor. It works hand in hand with config. But yeah, if config is more on the best practices, I guess Trusted Advisor is more on the governance side of things. Extending this implementation is implementing continuous monitoring. So the collaboration tool of the client, their choice is Slack. So Slack has some APIs that we can use for us to be able to communicate with the different channels and the um, developers that are using Slack for that matter. So I don't think the diagram has CloudFormation here, but for monitoring of the infrastructure and the applications, you're leveraging CloudFormation, and we created Lambda functions as well to have the CloudFormation alerts publish messages to Slack immediately and mention the team that are concerned with that specific microservice whenever it's down or whenever it's experiencing any issues or errors for that matter. So yeah, at a glance or at a very high level, these are the tools or the tool stack that in the long run have been employed by the client. It's a combination of open source tools and external third party um, applications or tools that the client has purchased a license of. No? So I guess I'll go with these ones one by one. So yeah, I grayscaled the ones that are not open source. So oh no, sorry. The ones that are in color in this slide are the open source tools, which are part of the Accenture DevOps platform. So provisioning these tools was fairly easy because the ADOP, which is by the way open source and is available in GitHub. If you guys wish to explore the platform, it's open source. um, yeah, so these are the tools under the ADOP for the platform. Some of these are installed as plugins. That includes Karma for unit tests, Protractor for automated functional tests, hand in hand with Selenium. We manually installed these as plugins in Jenkins. But yeah, also we have leveraged DevOps and tools in AWS, particularly the built-in artifact repository of Elastic Beanstalk. No, so I forgot to mention that the ADOP or the Accenture DevOps platform has Nexus as the artifactory or the artifact repository built in. But since we don't want to decouple the storing of the artifacts further, and Elastic Beanstalk has an in-house method or a dashboard in storing previously deployed artifacts, we just leveraged that and implemented a life cycle so that these artifacts will not last or will not exist for eternity, and to further optimize the costs being incurred by the services to the client. For deployment, of course, it's given that AWS Elastic Beanstalk is the way. For monitoring, we had CloudFormation integrated with Lambda and Slack for alerting. In regards to the third-party services that we had, for application lifecycle management, the client is using Rally. Um, for other use cases, I believe the most mainstream one is Jira Server or Jira Cloud. Yeah, but it's basically a source of functional requirements for the team for any development tasks or bug fixes. In terms of code analysis, this actually JFrog X-Ray is not part of the tool stack in the platform, but since it's a good uh, tool and I was able to use and leverage this tool in another client, I figured I include this in the talk for tonight. So JFrog X-Ray mainly differs with SonarQube in a sense that it targets vulnerabilities and licenses that are not updated anymore, and known vulnerabilities published in OWASP. So it's a pretty good tool in targeting vulnerabilities in the code. Now, if you think SonarQube is not up to that task. So in terms of monitoring, since this is an application, a web application, an SPA for that matter, with APIs exposed to the internet, we want to also monitor the availability and the health of these APIs. So New Relic was the way to go. The client purchased a license for New Relic. the way I configured the alerts here is a pretty much simple approach. No, we are querying or doing requests from time to time at a specific interval for APIs just to make sure that they are up, they are running. Of course, the threshold or the metric or the KPI is the status code that is being returned by the requests that we do in the APIs. So apart from that, metrics that can be monitored or gathered by New Relic include the response time of the SPA or the single page application. How long is it loading in the client's browsers? No, the the states or the geographical locations from which the requests are coming in are also recorded in the tool, right? So in terms of value creation, given that we implemented DevOps in this nonprofit organization, the team was able to realize 50% faster builds, no, from manual execution of the builds. Now every execution of every push to GitHub will trigger an automated build for that matter. And in turn, there are 50% more builds happening each day. No? And I believe having builds, frequent builds will cause or will give the benefit of early feedback to the developers if there are no issues or codes or bugs introduced in the source code. So in terms of deployments, there are 60% faster, more deployments to staging environments. No, in production, this is much faster or faster since in doing DevOps in production deployments, you do not have to implement code analysis and other rigorous steps since we are assuming that the application is fairly of high quality once we deploy it to production. So yeah, actually during my 5 years doing DevOps engineering in Accenture, this has always been a question that I, if not asked to my colleagues, I ask to myself, what is the right way of doing DevOps? No, so actually, there's no end goal in doing DevOps. There's no right way. There's no standard way of doing DevOps. It always varies with the platform, with the culture that the team is having. And given that there's no end goal in doing DevOps, of course, one main goal that the client or the team must harness or must embrace is the continuous improvement of the implementation. Another mantra that I always do as a DevOps engineer is I always think like there is no box. Oftentimes we hear the say think outside the box, no, but yeah, I've learned that if we think outside the box, what happens for the things that are actually inside the box? Are we trying to forget the problems, the challenges, and the learnings that we got in the way? So in a way, DevOps is just trying to remove the silos, blur the lines between teams. No? So yeah, I guess this is one thing that I've learned along the way. And finally, listening is always half the battle. In engaging with clients, I always come into projects having a mindset of what to implement. No, but yeah, I came to learn that there are no specific blueprints or standard ways of implementing DevOps that will always satisfy the clients. You always have to listen. You always have to identify the pain points or the gaps that may or may not have been included in the blueprints that you're more aligned with or more well versed with. No? So yeah, I guess I'll end the talk sharing my experience as a DevOps engineer and how I grew into someone from having no certifications or having no knowledge in solutioning. I came to realize that as we gain expertise, the more we realize that we are really not experts. The more we get exposed to different technologies and services. Now, I can say that at this point in my career, I somehow feel some sort of a beginner or a newbie in the wide and emerging technologies in DevOps. But yeah, for the stints or the duration that I had in the company or doing DevOps, I can say that it's a good way or it's a good place to be. DevOps is a good place to be because you have no choice but to embrace the change, embrace being able to be adaptive to any type of platform you get exposed to. Okay, so Yeah, this is my last slide, Alvin. I guess I can open the floor now for Q&A.
All right. Thank you for that wonderful topic, and it was very um, in, informative, given the fact that the flows and the steps were explained well in a minute detail, right? And thank you, Ren. Thank you, Accenture, for allowing the AWS community hear Ren's expertise and um, specialties and what he's doing inside. Um, Now we have two questions being piled up. The rest, you can just type in your question and I'll start reading it. So first question, Ren. Do DevOps engineers do L1 tickets like I do in my current job? Am I actually a cloud DevOps support engineer in my current company?
Right, good question. Yeah, actually, in our team in Accenture, DevOps engineering is not limited to DevOps implementation. There are specific projects that have mature DevOps implementations already. So, for specific engagements, we do cater to do support for the current DevOps implementation. And yeah, L1 tickets is really not something new in the DevOps world. I myself was able to engage with the client before. We do handle L1 tickets, albeit a not so strict SLA. And uh, I guess I don't want to assume no that this this question comes from a concern that am I doing DevOps properly, answering just L1 tickets. No, so I guess unsolicited advice from someone who did support work as a DevOps engineer. um, the story of doing DevOps really does not end in support. No, you can always gather as much knowledge as you have, as you can, rather in that specific project or in that specific client, knowing that their implementation is mature already, so that when you get into other clients or engagement, you have that equipment or you have that ability or knowledge with you, so you can in turn use that knowledge in doing other DevOps jobs such as implementation or assessment for that matter.
All right, thank you, Ren. And by the way, shout out to our 98 participants in the room. What a good number, good count. So second question, um, for Sonar Cube, do you use modified quality gate? Your the pipeline or the use of default quality gate offer sorry offer by Sonar Cube. Follow-up question, do you put specific condition wherein if the result of the Sonar Cube is failed, do you still continue your pipeline?
Right. Once again, good question, and something that is near and dear to my heart because this is actually a use case that we had in this specific client that I shared with you guys. So when we implemented Sonar Cube, since it was not really implemented when I rolled in, it was pretty much given that there will be a lot of vulnerabilities since they were not doing code analysis. So the way we implemented code quality analysis with SonarCube was some sort of a baby step. No, we started with a very low threshold, no, some sort of 50%, and then we increase it as we go along, and as the developers are trying to resolve those vulnerabilities or issues that have been discovered by SonarCube. I guess the perfect answer for this is yes, you can configure. We did configure quality gates. No, we did not start with a perfect or zero threshold quality gates, since, as I mentioned earlier, perfecting DevOps does not happen overnight, and it will always be a conversation or a collaboration with the development team and the client team. As long as the client is made aware that okay, these are the plan, this is the approach that we're trying to do, no, and given that they're doing agile. Normally, they will do those bug fixes on top of development work. So yeah, we did not use, or we did use default quality gates, but we fine tuned them, in the approach or in the sprint planning of the client.
Okay, thank you, Ren. By the way, we have a lot of questions being typed in. Keep it
Yeah,
coming,
I'm
guys. We
actually
have
seeing them.
interesting topic in place. Yeah. Okay, next one. By the way, as an electronics engineer, I would presume this is an ECE
Mhm.
profession. Will my DevOps engineer certification in AWS and SAA certification in AWS be a CPD certified by PRC?
Okay. Siguro ano, itong si sir or ma'am na nagtanong is still trying to think if it's gonna pursue yung electronics track, no? But for me kasi, I'm also an electronics engineer by degree. I actually graduated electronics engineering from UST and also got my license from PRC. I did not renew it anymore, no, since I'm more focused now in pursuing a track in IT and in cloud. But yeah, this is one thing that you are also wondering before, and one of my colleagues asked it directly from the PRC office. Yes, indeed, the certifications given by AWS are credited by a CPD, continuous professional development points. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you for answering them. Next, uh, what is your advice to IT engineers or professional who do not have development background who are interested to pursue a DevOps career? Danielle from Batangas.
Hi, Daniel from Batangas. This answer is from Pampanga. So yeah, my answer to this is you really do not need extensive programming development background not to be a DevOps engineer. Given that I'm also an electronics engineer, I have very little programming exposure to programming. My only background in programming was when we did our thesis. So, but Accenture keeps on hiring electronics engineers. I'm not sure why. Maybe because of our analytical skills or programming skills. I don't really know. But yeah, my advice for IT engineers or professionals who don't have development background is you're in the right place, no? You're in the right, you're right where you're supposed to be. Achieving credentials as a DevOps engineer again doesn't happen overnight. um, the perhaps a first step, a good first step that you can do is to at least have some familiarity to the platform or the technology that your client or your target client is using. No, because being a DevOps master doesn't really happen in 1 year, in 1 month, given there are a lot of technologies that you can do DevOps with or DevOps in. No? So it's practically impossible to to be a jack of all trades as a DevOps engineer. So but yeah, there are specific programming languages that are indeed really very useful as DevOps or for the DevOps engineering track. No? Unix is a good way to start. Python is also a bread and butter in doing automation with DevOps, and perhaps familiarization with domain-specific languages. So these are languages that do not really have a standard, but they vary from platform to platform. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Ren. Now, let me go to the chat based on the timestamp the questions are asked. We have here one from Gary. How many resources from the center work on the project?
For the project that I shared, for the engagement that I used in the talk, there are two resources, DevOps engineers. I was working with one colleague of mine. She was actually my batchmate during my college years. So working with her was a breeze, no? But given that we're both juniors during that time, and there really was not a DevOps architect to supervise us, no? We really work closely with the product owner and the development team to arrive in that approach or in that level of DevOps maturity.
Okay.
But yeah,
Um, no, go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
So yeah, it really is not limited to just two resources. Some clients on board or ask for a huge team, no? 5 to 10 teams, no? But since DevOps is a key enabler of Agile, we normally do not see teams that have a lot of DevOps resources. Normally, there are one or two resources. One is a junior, and another is perhaps an architect or senior to guide the or to drive the transformation to DevOps.
Okay. Now, since we are time bound with the Q&A, we'll keep the Q&A queue, keep the questions um, flowing in. What we'll do is hopefully before we end the session, we can go back to these questions, and anyone from the panelists to the speakers can just uh, bite, take a bite, take a piece of this. All right. Now, thank you, Ren, and final words before we proceed to the next speaker.
Um, Final words. Thank you to AWSUG.PH for organizing meetups like this one. It's actually my first time joining this, and I look forward to joining the succeeding talks or webinars that you guys will be uh, organizing. No? And for the rest or the current or aspiring DevOps engineers, I am seeing or scanning some questions here, na, and most of these are concerns about careers or specialties. So my piece of advice that I could give is, it's okay to be in a comfort zone, no? But I myself, I can say that you won't learn much if you keep yourself or in a bubble in your comfort zone. No? Try to explore, try to expose yourself to different platforms, different technologies. Get your hands dirty. No, don't be afraid to commit mistakes and errors because that's the only way to learn. All right. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Ren. And then shout out, we've reached the 100 mark. We are now 101 in the room. So keep your questions flowing in. We'll get back to that. So with regard to the questions being asked, I'd like to uh, give some thoughts, my 2 cents of it. Like, people always ask how to start being a DevOps, right? And it's the same um, thought that goes back to my mind when I started. I came from a background where I don't have any formal education to start with. And then all I have are the scars out from my journey. So don't let someone who doesn't have any formal education beat you in the field of learning. And as they say, before you can automate anything, or as they say, you cannot automate anything you haven't done manually. So always start with that level one ticket, always start being a support. Those are good areas to start being a DevOps engineer. Next up is the second speaker from eCloud Valley. So we have Jelly Liao. Our next speaker is an AWS Solutions Architect of eCloud Valley. She is specialized in cloud migration and DevOps. She has provided AWS architectures and technical solutions such as cloud migration, networking, storage, backup, DevOps, serverless, security, and disaster and recovery for 30 companies, which are composed of banks, media companies, largest telecommunication company, largest food chain, and the largest conglomerate in the Philippines. This is a very good introduction, and hope everyone enjoys the topic that Jelly will talk about. Jelly, take it away.
Yep. Thanks, Alvin. Thank you for the introduction. And I just want to thank as well the AWS user group for inviting me to speak up for this night session. Let me just share my screen. Oops, hold a sec. It's happening. Let me just. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, yeah, you can see it.
Yep. All right. So thank you again to AWS User Group Philippines for inviting me here. And so for tonight's session, I'll be talking about on how you will secure your application with AWS with security features and services. So our today's agenda is types of threats. Number one, our second agenda is why web application security is important. Third would be AWS approach to secure web applications. Then fourth would be integrating security practices within the DevOps process. Okay, so types of threats. So there is no exploit attack if there is no application vulnerability. So what is an application vulnerability? It is a system flaw or a weakness of an application that can be exploited to facilitate a cybercrime. So once an attacker found a system flaw or weaknesses to your application and determine how to access it, it can be used to exploit that application vulnerability and to do a cybercrime in your environment in AWS. So these are actually the top 5 cyber attacks around the world. So we have here the cross-site scripting attacks. We have the SQL injection. We have the DDoS attack, the ransomware and brute force attack. So to give you an overview of how does the cyber attacks work. So number one, for cross-site scripting, this security vulnerability is usually found in web applications or websites that actually accepts user inputs. So for example, like search engines, login forms, message board, and comment boxes. Okay. And then as for SQL injection, this is a type of security vulnerability that the attacker interferes on the query that an application makes to its database. So once an attacker is successful to do that, the attacker will be able to retrieve such important data, such as username, password, address, and credit card informations. So we also have here the distributed the DDoS attack. So the DDoS attack is how it works is it actually disrupts the normal traffic to your targeted server by overwhelming it by flooding it with internet servers until your server goes down. Okay, and we also have for the other cyber attacks is we also have the ransomware and brute force attack. Okay, so this is an example of an attack that happened in 2020. Their database has been hacked. So EasyJet is an airline company in UK. So the attacker was able to stall 9 million data records and as well as 2,200 credit card information. So because of this, EasyJet faced a penalty of amounting to tens of millions of pounds due to the breach of general data protection regulation. Okay, and here is an example of a type of attack, a DDoS attack in 2016 for a DNS provider. So what happened here is it has a DDoS attack that happens. So there are actually multiple servers that are inaccessible because of this attack, which are like GitHub, HBO, Twitter, Reddit, PayPal, Netflix, and Airbnb. Okay, so why does it matter to secure application, not just on AWS, even on premise? So number one, availability, because flooding servers can impact the performance and degrade drastically the user experience, because an attack can actually last for hours or even days. Then second would be financial impact, because an attack that bring down the server will actually end up as a lost revenue. So you could actually massively scale, but that will just translate to an increased infrastructure expenses. Okay. Then third would be security, because any stolen data can be misused against you. Okay. So here is I'll be discussing the AWS approach to secure web applications. Okay. So security and compliance in AWS is a shared responsibility between AWS and the customer. This model defines what you as an AWS account holder or user and AWS are responsible for when it comes to security and compliance. The customer is responsible for security in the cloud. So as a customer, you are completely responsible for your data. If you lose your data, if you deleted your data, if your compute got a virus and your data gets destroyed, and you're also responsible for the applications you install on compute services, the authentication and authorization to access your AWS services via users, rules, groups, and policies. You are also responsible for the network traffic protection, meaning how you encrypt your data, how you make sure that it's going to the right place through route table, and network and firewall configurations such as security groups and network access control lists. So if you're running on EC2 and you got a Linux or Windows OS there, you need to manage the operating system itself. Okay. Then AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud. So meaning AWS is responsible for protecting the infrastructure that runs all of the services offered in the AWS cloud, securing the hardware, data centers, the physical infrastructure of AWS, the staff that controls and secures those data centers, and the software that runs on the compute, storage, database, and networking. So combined with AWS and customers' responsibilities is equal to the compliance. So both have part. Okay. So for the data privacy, AWS actually complies with the Philippines Data Privacy Act 2012 and it's implementing rules and regulations that applies to the protection of personal data in the Philippines, including when personal data is transferred internationally for processing. Aside from that, AWS supports more security standards and compliance certifications than any other offering, including PCI, HIPAA, FedRAMP, GDPR, FIPS 140-2, and NIST 800-171, helping customers to satisfy compliance requirements virtually for every regulatory agency around the globe. AWS does not have the visibility into or knowledge of what customers are uploading into its network, including whether or not the data is deemed subject to the Privacy Act. Okay. So here is the AWS native security features that we can leverage to our AWS environment. So the security features are actually free, and you don't pay. Are actually free, and you don't need to pay anything. So we have here number one, the security group. Security group is the firewall on your instance or resource level, such as EC2, RDS, and etc. And we also have here the network access control list. This is actually the firewall on your subnet level. And we have here the third is the IAM, Identity and Access Management. So it controls who is authenticated and authorized to access AWS resources such as EC2, RDS, and other resources as well. And also the data encryption with AWS KMS, Key Management Service. So here, you can actually create and store your keys. And AWS actually uses the highest level of encryption, which is AES 256 for data protection. And also for the last part, we have here the AWS Shield Standard. So Shield Standard is a managed service that provides protection against DDoS attacks for applications running on AWS. So AWS Shield is actually enabled by default to all of the AWS customers with no additional cost. Okay. Okay. So next would be, I'll be discussing the AWS security tools that we can use in order to enhance more our cloud security posture on AWS. So what is AWS Guard Duty? So Guard Duty is actually a threat detection service that continuously monitors your AWS account, your workloads, and data stored in S3. So it is actually monitoring the CloudTrail events, even the VPC flow logs and DNS logs. Okay. Next is what is AWS WAF? So WAF is a web application firewall that helps you protect your web application from attacks by allowing you to configure rules to allow, block, and modify on the web requests. So with WAF, WAF comes with managed rule groups. So managed rule groups are actually predefined rules that are available on AWS console that you can leverage, that you can use as starting point or as a base. But if you need like a custom protection on the layer 7, you can actually create advanced and custom rules as well. So with WAF, it's actually protecting the layer 6 and layer 7 of the OSI model, the web layer. So with WAF, you can actually integrate that with Amazon CloudFront, our CDN, content delivery network, and you can also integrate that with our application load balancer, and you can also integrate that with Amazon API gateway for the REST APIs. Okay. So next is next would be AWS Shield. So AWS Shield is a managed service that provides protection against DDoS attacks for application running on AWS. So with Shield, we have actually 2 tiers. We have the standard and the advanced. So here for the use case, for the standard, it provides protection against layer 3 and layer 4 DDoS attacks. And for the advanced, it provides protection and mitigation process for network layer 3, layer 4, and application layer 7 attacks. Okay, so the example of the layer 3 and layer 4 7 is layer 3 and 4 attacks are actually SYN floods, UDP floods, and reflection attacks. Okay, so in my next slide, I will be discussing more in depthly what are their difference. Okay. So here, with AWS Shield standard, it is automatically enabled to all of the AWS customers at no additional cost. So it will give you a layer 3 and 4 protection for everyone. So it will give you a protection like protection from SYN floods, UDP floods, and reflection attacks. While on the Shield Advanced, it is normally used for higher levels of protection against attacks like HTTP floods and DNS query floods. So as you can see here, for the enhanced protection for the advanced, it provides you a DDoS protection and mitigation responsibilities for layer 3, 4, and layer 7. So that's one of the main difference between standard and advanced as well, because in standard you have to create your own protection and mitigation process for the layer 7, but with Shield Advanced, it will be handled by AWS. Okay, so next would be you're gonna have a 24/7 access to DDoS response team. So this is actually an assistance during a DDoS attack. And for the visibility and compliance, you're gonna have also like attack diagnostics. So it will give you a attack details for triaging, HTTP request samples, and automate incident response with AWS WAF rules. Okay. And for economic benefits, AWS WAF, you're gonna have WAF with no additional cost, and AWS Firewall Manager at no additional cost as well. And what I like about this, it will give you a cost protection for scaling. So it means that it safeguards you from scaling charges as a result of a DDoS attack that causes usage spikes on your AWS services. Okay. So in summary, those are the security features or security services that we can leverage to secure our environment or our infrastructure on AWS. But on my next slide, I'll be talking about on how you can integrate security in your CI/CD pipeline or DevOps. Okay, so what we have run through is security and compliance in AWS, data privacy, AWS approach to secure application on AWS. Okay, so here I'll be discussing the integration of security practices within the DevOps process. So what is DevOps? DevOps is a set of practices that combine software development and IT operations. It aims to shorten the system development lifecycle and provide continuous delivery with high software quality. So with that, I believe we were able to discuss DevOps before by Ren. So here I'll be talking about the DevSecOps. So what is DevSecOps? So DevSecOps is the philosophy of integrating security practices within the DevOps process. So DevSecOps is a natural and necessary response to the bottleneck effect of older security models on the modern continuous delivery pipeline. So the goal here is to bridge traditional gaps between IT and security while ensuring fast, safe delivery of code. Okay. So here is the tool that we will be leveraging for the code quality and code security. This is actually a hidden gem in the InfoSec world that we can use or leverage. So we have here SonarQube. So SonarQube is an open source platform developed by SonarSource for continuous inspection of code quality to perform automatic reviews, static analysis of code to detect bugs, code smells, security vulnerabilities on 27 programming languages. So SonarQube offers reports on duplicated code, coding standards, unit tests, code coverage, code complexity, comments, bugs, and security vulnerabilities. So here are actually some of the features that you can use with SonarQube. You have here the show of your current quality of code, uses a water leak paradigm to manage code quality, enforces quality gate, analyzes pull requests, highlight hotspots, gives a detailed version of issues. Using the web API, SonarQube can be automated. And using webhooks, SonarQube can be integrated as a promotion step in the delivery pipeline and provides great notifications. Okay. So here is a sample, a reference, a CI/CD, a reference, a serverless CI/CD architecture. So let's discuss first the services that I'm going to be using on AWS. I'm going to use here AWS Code Pipeline. So AWS Code Pipeline is a continuous delivery service that enables you to model, visualize, and automate the steps required to release your software. So you can also use Code Pipeline to deploy your code to ECS. Okay, so what is ECS? So ECS is Elastic Container Service on AWS. This is actually a container management service to run, stop, and manage Docker containers. But for this type of ECS, we use the serverless one, which is the ECS cluster on Fargate. So with Fargate, Fargate is actually a serverless compute engine for containers that actually works with ECS and EKS. So EKS is Elastic Kubernetes Service. So with ECS cluster Fargate, it makes it easy for you to focus on building your application. So Fargate removes the need for you to provision and manage servers. So it lets you specify and pay for resources per application and improve security through application isolation by design. Okay, and we also have here the Elastic Container Registry. It is a fully managed container registry that makes it easy to store, manage, share, and deploy your container images and artifacts everywhere. So we have also here the AWS code build. So the AWS code build is it will be used to build and run some tests and push the code to ECR. Okay, so if you are going to follow here the flow of the CI/CD is number one, a developer makes changes to application source code on a code repository GitHub, and a GitHub webhook triggers the AWS code build to perform the static code analysis, build, push the image to Elastic Container Registry, and the code pipeline will be used to deploy the code to ECS cluster for Gate by pulling the image to Amazon ECR. So for SonarQube, we're gonna need to launch an EC2 and install our SonarQube application there. And for us to be able to call it, is we need to call it on the build spec YAML on our code build. And then what happens here is, if, for example, your app, we run a build, and then SonarQube detected a certain vulnerability or error on our application, then the build will not progress to the deployment. The build will be the build will actually fail. Okay. So in summary, I think this is my last slide. So in summary, what we have discussed is security and compliance in AWS, data privacy, AWS approach to secure application on AWS by leveraging security groups, NACLs, IAM, data encryption with AWS KMS, AWS Shield Standard and Advanced, WAF and Guard Duty, and also integrating security practices within the DevOps process, which is the DevSecOps. Yeah. I think that ends my presentation, and I can proceed with the Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Jelly. So that's a very interesting topic, how security ties in deeply with DevOps practices. Now, we have 3 open questions. I'll start from the one asked by Nestor. Have you tried Cloudflare? If yes, how does it compare to AWS Shield as far as protection from attacks is concerned?
Yeah, for Cloudflare, I believe it's normally used for CDN, and it also it is you can also I believe with Cloudflare also it is integrated with a web application firewall as well. But I think the appropriate answer there is if you're gonna compare it Cloudflare, it's more of comparing it with the CloudFront and WAF, and not from Shield. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next one is from Stephen. How would you handle or prevent a compromised laptop as a vulnerability attack to your infrastructure?
Yeah, a good question. We can actually leverage the security groups, which is actually our firewall on the AWS resources. And aside from security groups, we can actually leverage NACLs as well, which is the firewall on the subnet level.
Okay, thank you. Next is, what is the day-to-day task of a solutions architect in the team? Do they take part in software development?
Yeah, good question. For as an SE in Good Valley, my day-to-day task is actually more like providing different solutions to the customers, because sometimes it's not sometimes some of our customers it's not like all about DevOps. Some of them have a different use cases, like some of them have cloud migrations, some of them have disaster recovery, or even a backup or even a backup projects. So as part of an SA team is for us to be able to produce a solution very fast.
Okay, thank you. Next is from Kevin. Do you implement any rollbacks when something happens while the pipeline is running?
For the rollbacks, we can also integrate that with our code pipeline as well, together with the code build that it has. The code build is using SonarQube, right? So if there's if there's a failure in the build, we can also integrate it with a rollback process as well.
Okay, thank you. Next one is from Mark. By the way, keep your questions coming. We have 104 participants in the room. What is the best threshold on your Sonar quality gates?
For the quality gates, for now, we're just using the default.
Okay, thank you.
But you can also
Next one
customize
is,
it if you prefer.
proceeding. Next one is regarding AWS guard duty. Is this costly or it depends?
Actually, it depends. So to give you a cost estimation, like let's say you're monitoring cloud trail management events for let's say 1 million. And then you're gonna monitor as well 200 gig of VPC flow logs. It's gonna cost you 234 USD.
Good to have those numbers in mind. Okay. Next one. Can a DevOps engineer become a DevOps architect instead of being a solutions architect? From my point of view, is that DevOps is being drifted apart from cloud architect?
If your question is, can a DevOps engineer become a DevOps architect? Yes. The answer is yes. Yeah. And if you're going to ask me, the main difference is I can say that DevOps architect is more focused on the DevOps process and solutions, while the cloud architect is more of, I can say, broader, because it covers other projects as well, such as let's say DR, backups, and migration, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, next question. Let me jump into the chat because there's uh, one person asking regarding the denial of service. Does the denial of service team have a response time? So maybe it is pertaining to the SLA, SLOs for that team.
Yes. If you're talking about the AWS Shield Advance, it will give you a 24/7 availability.
24/7.
Yeah.
Okay, next one, still on the chat. Based on the last diagram, the Sonar Cube analysis stops the execution of the build process if it doesn't pass the quality gate.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Based on the last diagram, does the Sonar Cube analysis stops the execution of the build process if it doesn't pass the quality gate?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so we'll give room for two more questions, and then the rest can just be answered as we proceed to the last and the third speaker. So, second to the last question. Most common concern I encounter with SMEs are the cost of deploying through the cloud. What is the best analogy I can use so they can see the benefits of using AWS?
Yeah.
May
Good
Kapitan
question.
Kidlat.
Yeah, good question. So when moving to AWS, there are a lot of um, um, I could say features that you can leverage. For the cost, number one for the cost on AWS is actually pay as you go. So you only pay for the resources you use. So you can quickly scale up or scale down your resources. And then you can also leverage high availability and scalability as well on AWS. So those are some that you can leverage on AWS.
Plus, they can avail for the startup program if they are
Yeah,
a startup.
correct.
Okay, last question. How do we completely stop incoming attacks and how do we filter data from what is important and not important?
Yeah, good question. So so the incoming attacks is, let's say, the attacks that we're talking about is on the web application layer. So what we can do is we can create rules. On that rules, we can customize it. We can we based on that rule, we can allow, block, or modify which incoming request we can allow. So on that rule, we can actually specify the IP address, the HTTP query strings, and other parameters as well.
Okay, that would be the last question for the second topic. The rest of the question, Deli, you can answer it in the Q&A section.
Yeah, thank you, Alwin. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, all right. Now, before we proceed to our final speaker, for those who just joined, please take the survey. I'm putting the link in the chat and get the chance to win a hoodie from our very own sponsor for this month's meetup, Accenture. By the way, just for the record, we're still on the 100 mark for participants. 106. Now, proceeding to the last and final speaker. The speaker is a solutions architect from Traveloka, a unicorn startup based in Indonesia. He's been using AWS since 2009. The past 5 years, he's been busy doing consulting work for unicorn startup in Southeast Asia and China. Tonight, he will be talking about linear and canary ECS deployment using AWS CodeDeploy. Give it up for JR Dalino.
Okay, thanks, Alvin. I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna be switching tabs often, so I'm not gonna do a full screen on Chrome. Yeah, so good evening, everyone. I'm Jose Dalino from Traveloka Engineering, and this evening I'll be talking about linear and canary ECS deployments using AWS CodeDeploy. Okay, so a few things about me. Yeah, I'm a solutions architect at Traveloka, but I don't really just do solutions. I do like infrastructure, enterprise, data architecture as well. So I look after overall technology, architecture, operations, principles, mechanisms, structures, standards, technology roadmap, so fun stuff. I'm also a software engineering graduate student at the National University of Singapore right now. I used to be a technical cloud consultant at AWS. I spent 2.5 years with them. Yeah, for the purposes of this talk, I have 8 AWS certifications, and I'm certified with other cloud providers as well. Okay, so I want this talk to be really practical and not just show a bunch of slides. So I want you to be able to take something that you can start using in your organizations. So I'll be doing a live demo, and I'll be sharing my Git repository to you, so you can take a look and start running in your own environments and start playing with it. We only have 30 minutes, so allow me to provision the environment now, and then I can continue talking while this is running. So here I have a Terraform set of Terraform files that's going to create the network, the ECS cluster, CodeDeploy components. So I'm just going to run Terraform apply. And this will take around 4 or 5 minutes to create. Okay.
JR, excuse me, we can only see the slide. Are you sharing your terminal?
I am. Okay, hold on. Let me sort that out. Okay, how do I stop sharing? Screen share. How do I share my whole screen?
I think Zoom doesn't have that capability, JR. So
Okay,
you can just
okay.
jump in.
Right, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I am going to share my, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I have Visual Studio open, and then I have a set of Terraform files that I'll be showing you later. For now, I just ran Terraform apply, and then click on yes. And then I have a slide that shows the architectural diagram of what this whole thing creates. Okay, let's proceed then. Okay, I guess I need to share my slides again. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about what are the outcomes that we want to get out of this talk, right? Well, I introduced myself. I have a few slides about the company I work for, but I'll be doing a demo on how to do ramped linear deployments on ECS Fargate. For those who are beginners, I'll be giving a basic overview of DevOps tools and AWS services that I'm using. And then I'll give a comparison of common deployment strategies. And then I'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. Okay, so I have a few slides about Traveloka. So Traveloka is a unicorn startup that was founded in 2012 in Indonesia. So yes, leading lifestyle super app, travel, but we've been expanding to other types of product services and financial services as well, which you should see in this next slide. So in 2012, the company first started offering flights. Then a year after, they started offering hotels, accommodations, and then they added other transportation options, buses, shuttles, trains, car rentals. And then a couple of years after, they added experience, eats. And then 2, 3, 4 years ago, they started providing financial services. So initially financing for travel-related products, but we're starting to decouple these financial services as a completely different set of products now. So that includes pay later, credit card installments, financing, co-branded credit cards, bills payments, vouchers, digital wallets. So most of these products are available in Jakarta, in Indonesia, but we're starting to expand and release these products and services in Southeast Asia. So I'm not sure if you've seen in the news, we're doing some joint ventures with banks in Thailand and Vietnam as well. So let's take a look at some numbers. 60 million app installs. We have 40 million monthly active users, and we have a pretty decent sized inventory from partners and suppliers. So we're operating in the region. The headquarters is in Indonesia, but we have engineering offices in Singapore and in Bangalore in India. Okay, so and DevOps, fast, frequent, but safe deployments has been a key enabler in helping Traveloka scale its business. So what exactly are we gonna do or build in the remaining 20 minutes that I have? So here I have an application, basic Nginx web application. It's a version 1, that's blue. And then we're going to deploy a new version of our application on ECS, green. But instead of doing an abrupt replacement of this whole thing and just moving to this, we're gonna do a gradual safe deployments using like linears and canary deployments with co-deploy. And actually, I'm gonna share the repository so you can take a look at the code that I'm using. Okay, panelists and attendants. Okay. Can you guys still see my screen? I'm not sure if I'll stop sharing.
It stopped share.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so sorry, I'm getting distracted by this Zoom limitations. Okay, right. So I'm gonna share my Chrome window again. Okay. Yeah. So earlier we ran our the bunch of Terraform files, and this is what it's gonna create. Actually, the finished running it already. So it's gonna create the networking components, VPC, subnets, NAT gateways, internet gateways, route tables. It's going to create the ECS components. So ECS, the load balancers, the listeners, target groups, the task definition, the ECS service, and it's also going to create the code deploy components. So with code deploy, there are three constructs: your code deploy application, your code deploy configuration, and your code deploy group. Ideally, your code deploy will be part of a pipeline. So you've seen the previous slides earlier, but for the purposes of this talk, just want to keep it simple, and I'll be doing a manual deployment using the console, creating a new revision in the ECS service, and the double trigger code deploy release. Okay, so right, so let's go to our Okay, so the demo of releasing this will take around 10 minutes to run because I'll be shifting traffic, 10% of traffic like every minute, and that's gonna take 10 minutes. So I want this to complete by the time I finish this talk. So let me do that first. So I'm going to change share. Which one am I gonna share? Okay, I'm gonna share this one. So here I have my repository. Actually, before I share this, I'll show you what I'm gonna deploy first. So I'm gonna share my Chrome again, and this is what I'm gonna deploy. So in this repository, I have a basic Nginx application with two branches. So in my main branch, I have this web application with a blue background, and then in my V2 branch, I have a green background. So it's easy to distinguish which version we're seeing. Okay, and then now I need to switch again to a different screen, and I'm going to switch to my Visual Studio. Okay, so here, Visual Studio, what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to, assuming that you've cloned the repository and you've changed directory to this /docker directory, I'm now going to log in to authenticate with ECR. Okay, login succeeded. I'm now going to run docker build. Wait, let me double check if I'm on the right branch. Okay, check out. Do it again. Docker build. Then I'm going to run docker tag and tag this as v1. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yes, here I can see
Okay.
Visual Studio Code.
Okay. And then, so after running docker build, I'm going to run docker tag this is v1. And then something that I missed, because I just prepared this presentation yesterday, I wasn't able to add the ECR permissions in my Terraform code. So I'm going to have to do that manually. So let's jump to ECR as the container registry. And then I'm going to click on my repository. I'm going to click on permissions. I'm going to click on edit. I'm going to add a statement. Default. I'm just going to allow, and don't do this in production. I'm just going to give everyone access to all actions, because there are several actions required, and I don't have time to choose them one by one. Okay, allow everyone, and then I'm going to click on save. Okay, so now that I've added my ECR permissions, I should be able to run Docker push, which should push this to my ECR repository. Okay, so now I'm done pushing my version 1. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the same for version 2. So I'm going to run checkout v2, and I'm going to run docker build, docker tag as v2, and I'm going to run docker push and push this to my ECR repository. Okay, so let's double check the Docker images I have locally. So I have these 3 Docker images, and then let's now go to the ECS console. Okay, I'm gonna have to move to the ECS console, share. And then if I go to ECS images and I refresh this, I can see V1 and V2 pushed just a few minutes ago. Okay, and then what I need to do now is I need to check if my ECS service has deployed this image. So I'm gonna go to ECS. Okay, and then I have 2 running tasks. So I should be able to get my endpoints from ALB. I'm gonna go to my load balancers, and I'm going to copy the DNS name here. I'm gonna replace this. So yeah, this is my version 1 or blue, and running on port 80, and then this one I'm gonna put port 8080 in the end, but it should show as service temporary unavailable for now. Okay, so I think we're ready to do our deployment. So let's go back to our slides. Okay, so yeah, let's do the deployment now. So we have an ECS service with co-deploy as the controller. And then now we have a deployment group using a new linear configuration. And now we need to trigger the deployment by routing 10% of traffic every 1 minute. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. And to do that, I need to go to my ECS console. And I'm going to go to my, let's go to ECS. And then I'm going to go to ECS task definitions. I'm going to check the box beside my task definition, and then I'm going to create a new revision. Then I'm going to scroll down to container definitions. I'm going to click on my container name. And then here in like under image, I'm going to replace V1 from V1 to V2. So normally, I mean, you wouldn't be doing these like manual changes on the console, right? It should be automated as part of your pipeline, but it's more visual and it gives you better understanding on how this whole thing works. Okay, so I'm gonna click on update, and I'm going to create the new revision. Okay, so now that I have the new revision, I need to update my ECS service to use the new task definition revision and trigger a co-deploy linear deployment. So I'm going to go to my ECS cluster, click on my ECS cluster. I'm gonna click on services, then on my service name, and then I'm going to click on update, right? And then I'm going to select the latest revision, just revision 10. Okay, not talking about ECS, so I'm not gonna talk about the ECS related configuration settings here. Wanted to to briefly tackle this. So here, if you're using code deploy as your deployment like tool, you'll be able to see this as your deployment type. Here you'll see your application name, your deployment group name, your deployment configuration, in which we're using ECS linear 10% every 1 minute deployments. And then you can also create several hooks, lifecycle hooks, if you want to customize actions as part of this deployment. I'm gonna click on next. And then here you'll find the load balancing parameters. Have two listeners, one for port 80, one for 8080, which forwards to these specific target groups. I'm gonna click on next. I don't have auto scaling enabled for now. I'm gonna click on next. Not gonna review this anymore. And then I'm going to click on update service. Okay, so here we can see that the service has been updated. The code deployment was created, and the blue-green deployment has been successfully started for the service. And we can see the deployment status in our code deploy console, which I'm going to see in another, which I'm going to show in another tab. So the configuration that we set is ECS linear, 10% every 1 minute. And traffic shifting will be 10% with intervals of 1 minute. So you'll be able to see this here in the code deploy console. So here under deployments, you have your deployment ID. Just quickly look at explore the different panels that we have here. So here on your upper left, you have your deployment status, which shows 5 steps. So step 1 would be deploying your replacement task set, which is currently running right now. So yeah. And then step 2 will be testing traffic router setup. And then step 3 will be rerouting the production traffic to replacement task set. And then step 4, it's going to wait for 5 minutes before terminating the original task set. Here on the upper right, you're going to see your traffic shifting progress. So for now, 100% of traffic is still in the original task set serving traffic. So we're still seeing blue. But once this starts routing traffic to the replacement task set, this will become 90, and then here you're going to show 10%. And then here, if we do auto refresh, like maybe 1 out of 10 refreshes, you're going to see green instead of blue. And then here, let's double check. So for our test listener in port 8080, we can now see the replacement task set, which shows color green. So it's going to shift the traffic here. Okay, what else do I want to show? Okay, so as you can see, we're done with step 2. Test traffic route setup is completed. So 90% of original test, 90% is remaining here. 10% is now on the replacement task set. And then I'm gonna refresh this. So you can see that it's green. So you'll see this maybe 1 out of 10. And then it's slowly going to, so linearly, it's slowly going to shift traffic into the new task set. Okay, what else can we see here? So here you can see your deployment details, your revision details, your task set activity, and your deployment lifecycle events. Okay, I have one slide that discusses the different concepts in code deploy. Code deploy application, code deploy configurations, and code deploy deployment group. So I'll discuss that when we get to that slide. Okay, so now we have our deployment running. Hopefully this finishes before my talk ends. Yeah, for the beginners, you've seen me use Git. So Git is an open source distributed version control system for tracking changes. So I store my code, my repositories in GitHub. So we use this for collaboration, source for your CI/CD pipelines. I use Terraform as infrastructure as code. As you can see, I had an empty AWS account. I was able to create this whole thing in like 3-4 minutes, right? So it's really very convenient. So AWS has its own IAC, CloudFormation. I don't really have a preference, but we just use Terraform in our organization. And Docker, container platform, which I use to create Docker images and then push them in the ECR repository. Okay, I guess I don't have enough time to discuss the different services here. I'm just gonna assume that you already know the ECS and like networking and ALB components. I'm just gonna focus on the code deploy components and concepts. So code deploy, so you have your code deploy application, which is just a container used by code deploy to ensure the correct revision, deployment configuration, and deployment group, and which are referenced during the deployment. Then you have your optional code deploy configuration. So here, this is where you could set your rules and success and failure conditions. For example, the ECS, linear, 10% every 1 minute or 10% every 3 minutes. And there are defaults, but you can create your custom configurations. And the third component would be your code deploy deployment group, which basically specifies the ECS service, load balancer, optional test listener, target groups, etc. When you're doing deployment. Okay. And let's actually take a look in the console. So here I have my code deploy application. So I only have this application name. If I click on my code deploy application, here I'll see my deployment groups, my revision. So this was automatically created when I created the revision in the ECS console. And then here is my deployments. So let's take a look at the deployment configurations. There are some defaults here. I'm going to filter this by typing ECS, and I can see 5 default configurations for ECS. So there's ECS all at once, which is very similar to blue-green deployments. So basically, it's just going to move the traffic all at the same time instead of gradually. And then I have my ECS linear, either 10% every 1 minute or 3 minutes. And then I have my ECS canary, 10% every 5 minutes or 10% every 15 minutes. And then here I have a slide that explains this. So with linear deployment configurations, it shifts traffic, 10% of traffic every minute until all traffic is shifted. So either 1 or 3, or you can also create your custom ones. The difference with canary deployments is with canary deployments, it shifts 10% of traffic in the first increment. And then after 5 minutes, the remaining 90% is deployed all at once. So it's not linear. So it sort of tests the release to a small subset of your users first before releasing it to everyone. And then here I just have a slide that does a simple comparison of the different deployment strategies. So again, it depends if you're trying to decide which one you use, because there are pros and cons with each approach that you take. So creating would be, version A terminated and then version B is rolled out. It's very simple. But the problem with this is, you're going to incur downtime. You can't really test you can't really do real traffic testing, and it creates negative impact on your users. And you also incur a long rollback duration period. You have your blue-green deployments, wherein version B is released alongside with version A, and then traffic is switched all at once to version B. So you have zero downtime, but you don't really do real traffic testing. So in case you release a bug, then all your customers will be able to get that release. This is also bit more expensive because you have two identical copies of your environment. But then rollback duration is quick. You just switch the traffic back to the old environment because it still exists, right? And then you have your ramped, your linear, and your canary deployments, wherein you incur zero downtime. You're able to test traffic to a subset of your customers before releasing it to everyone. Rollback is relatively quick. Although the challenge with these types of deployments is it's a bit complex to set up. Okay, yeah, actually that's my last slide. Let's just go back to, and I'm almost out of time anyways, but let's just go back to the code deploy. Okay, let's just go back to my deployments. I'm gonna click on my deployment ID. So here you can see that traffic shifting progress is now 80% of traffic is now on the replacement task set. Our remaining 20% is still in the original one. So yeah, so majority of traffic would be going to the green or version 2 that I've released already. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, so ideally your code deploy should be part of a full CI/CD pipeline. You have your source, which could be GitHub, and then you have your code pipeline that orchestrates the release of code changes from your source to your build, before deploying to ECS. So this is something that that you guys can try and build in your own time. Okay. Yeah, that's we're not gonna wait for this to finish, but yeah, I guess we can start moving to the Q&A section.
All right. Thank you, JR. Very interesting talk. Deep dive for the code deploy in ECS and the design principle. Now, we have 5 open questions, starting from the anonymous attendee. Can we have a copy of your slides?
Sure. How do I send this?
Maybe just, yeah. Okay, we have the answer. So
okay, I can send it to the organizers, and then they can figure out how to distribute it.
Sure.
Yes, sir. JR pa send na lang. We'll have it linked in sa follow-up post that he'll do at the end.
Okay.
Thank you, Sir JR.
Second question is from Kevin. Is this linear development is advisable on small to medium project? What is the advantage of this follow-up question?
For small deployments. So yeah, again, it's there are pros and cons, right? You get the benefits of being able to test your releases to a subset of your customers. So if you have a bug, instead of 100 customers getting it, you get 1 or 2 to try it out first. But then the cons would be it's a bit more complex to set up. So it's gonna add overhead to your team in setting it up and in managing it. But once once you have it set up and once you've mastered it, then it's really gonna help your organization scale and get those bug fixes, those new features, out there faster. And that's what we're trying to do, right?
Now, there's a follow-up question to that, JR. Is this linear deployment useful if we have a monolith application and we want to integrate this on our application?
Okay. Right. So 2012, when Traveloka was first created, it was a monolith, Java monolith. One code base, one pipeline, mono repository. So that was fine up until we had like maybe 30, 40 engineers. But then, builds were getting blocked. We were having multiple bottlenecks. So we had to, look for ways to scale. And scaling would be decoupling that from monolith to service oriented to microservices, and not just looking at the architecture. Decoupling and our teams as well as our people. So creating your two pizza teams. But then if you still have one pipeline, that would still be the bottleneck. So before we had a Jenkins cluster with dozens of worker nodes, but we were still getting blocked. So the good thing with code deploy, code pipeline is it's a managed service, right? We don't need to like manage the EC2 instances and manage those infrastructure by themselves. And with infrastructure as code, we can provision, tear down those pipelines. So basically, we have pipelines as code, and as we scale, horizontally, we just each team, each service would have its own pipeline, and that really allows us to be able to do more frequent, fast, and safe releases. With monoliths, you're constrained, right? You have constraints, and I'm not saying it's impossible. I've seen it done in some organizations, but it's not as easy as doing that in a distributed microservices environment. But there's still definitely benefits and value that you'll be able to get out of it.
Thank you, JR. Now, next question is, in a blue-green deployment, canary or rolling update deployments on EKS or ECS, how can we achieve a no downtime deployment if there's a change in the database schema or table? What's the best way to deal with the database change in CI/CD?
Right.
This is a very, very good question.
Right. And I mean, to be honest, there's no like single tool that you can buy or use, like one methodology or framework that you can pick and then apply, and it's gonna solve these problems, right? Orchestrating and choreography of distributed releases. So you have your infrastructure changes, you have your configuration changes, you have your application changes, you have your database changes. When you look at your database changes, you have your schema changes, you have your data changes, right? How do you coordinate all of that? And I mean, for now, it's really process, right? Culture and process. Culture and trying to adopt in like codifying everything, codifying your infrastructure in databases, codifying your DDL statements, your DML statements, storing it in a repository, and then having a clear process, identifying what are the what's the critical path, what are the dependencies. It's not easy, but it's doable, and I've seen several banks successful in implementing high velocity application slash with database changes in production.
I have a follow-up question to this, JR. So for large corporation, how does the canary deployment done? Do they consider the data layer as immutable, in which every canary deployment there's a corresponding provisioning of database, or no?
So sorry, can you clarify your question?
Yeah. So for the deployments, right? Do they consider the data layer as immutable, where every new deployment they will spin a replica or copy of that database of the original, and if it works well, they will now then use that database?
From what I've seen, it really varies, right? It depends on like many factors. Depends on your RPO, RTO availability, reliability metrics and contracts that you have with the business. Depends on your service level objectives. So I mean, if you have a database wherein you have a 24, you're allowed to be down for 24 hours, then it just makes it easier, right? You can make your changes, be offline, don't have to worry about it. But if you have critical 24/7 applications, financial services applications that can't really go down, then there's really no way there's no one way of doing it. uh, and it's not an easy question and the thing to tackle. But yes, immutable data layers is one way of doing it. I've seen a few organizations do that, but then yeah, sometimes you can't really just avoid. And when I did some work for a bank before, so we had like replicated databases across I think 27 countries. So when we do our production, so site-based databases, when we do our production database releases, so we would coordinate our like the data releases or data changes, the DDL changes. We also have our replication scripts, and then we built an internal tool that just web portal that synchronizes and coordinates that releases across all those different nodes. But yeah, that's an internal tool that we built internally. Well, that bank built internally.
That's good to know. Thank you for sharing your experience there. And actually, that's another good topic to have. Like I think what's missing in the big chunk of the realm of DevOps is the scaling on the data layer, which I think only a handful of people had experience, especially in the large petabytes of data. So hopefully we can grab some of those folks and talk over best practices.
You have
Yeah,
different
moving.
types of you have different data stores as well, right? I mean, like right now, as we have more and more people, organizations adopting purpose-built data stores. So I mean, before everyone would just use relational databases, and that's harder to scale. That's harder to make changes to. But with NoSQL, graph databases, it becomes a lot easier to like make schema changes because you don't have a schema, right? So it's and at the same time it's also distributed, so you're no longer you have more levers to tweak when making changes in production.
Agree. Now, proceeding to the other participants' question. Any personal preference using GitHub versus code commit?
Uh, Right. We don't really use code commit unless you're like all in AWS. Well, code commit has better integration with AWS. Before, like with GitHub, you would have to manage OAuth keys, which is not really safe. I think they improved that already. I don't really have a personal preference. We just mostly use GitHub in our organization, and like even personally, I use GitHub.
Next one. What are the best deployment method on Kubernetes or containerized environment?
Sorry, I can't see that question.
It's in the Q&A from Gary. What are the best deployment method on Kubernetes or any containerized environment?
Kubernetes. So yeah, in our organization, we have different types of environments, right? So we have ECS, we have EKS, we have like self-managed Kubernetes. We still have a lot of EC2 auto scaling groups, and we also have other cloud providers. It's so we're trying to give our product team. So I work for a central team. And what we do is we enable the different product teams to be able to choose different deployment methodologies depending on their requirements. So as I mentioned earlier, there are pros and cons, costs involved in these different methodologies. So again, we would be coordinating this with the business, right? what's their requirement, what's their budget, and we're gonna work with them in identifying what would work best for them. So we don't really have one single methodology for our organization. We try to accommodate the different needs and requirements because we have, as in my earlier slides, right? We have I think 40, 50 different products and services already.
Still a value proposition, right?
Mhm.
Um, Last question. Any tips on working with deployments for serverless architecture? What was that? Architecture and microservices.
Right, serverless. I've been looking into this the past few weeks. So there are multiple ways of doing this. So you have your developer focused tools like CDK. You have your serverless framework. You have your Amplify. You have tools like Pulumi. What else? You have your infrastructure as code, Terraform, CloudFormation. It's I guess it depends on who's using them. I mean, there's no single tool that's perfect, right? So one challenge that I'm seeing with say serverless SAM is, I mean, it's really easy to use from a developer's perspective. It's easy to bootstrap or get something up and running, but with that you lose the granularity and of control and permissions and hardening of the components because you don't really see them. Basically, these tools wrap your CloudFormation or Terraform scripts as part of your code base, but you don't get to customize them the way you would do if you would be interacting directly with CloudFormation and Terraform. And in highly regulated environments, financial services, there's a lot of configuration hardening that's needed to be able to if you're going to be running workloads that are PCI DSS certified or needs to comply with certain compliance or regulations. So at least in our organization, we try to get the most of two worlds. So for our innovations team, those that need to build POCs, get things up and running, we leave it up to them to be able to choose their framework or tool of choice in bootstrapping and creating an MVP. But for operational readiness assessment, checklist, and productionizing these services, we would run Terraform import, and we would still harden them before deploying them in production.
That's very insightful, by the way. Yeah. Last question. Do you practice automation of client broadcasting, team notification, monitoring, and rollbacks during a scheduled deployment? Or on your case, is it more of a scheduled deployment or continuous deployment?
We have dozens or hundreds of deployments every day. We don't really schedule deployments in our organization. Yeah.
But specific to this question, do you have any inputs? Like practice automation of client broadcasting, team notification, monitoring, and rollbacks during a scheduled deployment.
Right. So as part of, so yeah, that's another project that that I've been working on. So DORA metrics, observability, your mean time to restore, deployment frequency, lead time for changes. So there's no easy way to capture this, right? So say if your deployment frequency is decreasing, or your mean time before failure is decreasing, you get more failures, we would want to notify stakeholders. So with these tools, we use we use Slack, we use PagerDuty, we use Datadog. So you can definitely hook this up using webhooks, alarms. These third-party tools have APIs, so it's not really that hard to set up your custom notification set up custom notifications based on the specific business rules that that you have.
All right. Thank you, JR. By the way, I do have a personal question, last one. Like for this type of deployment, how will you identify false negative alerts? Because false positive is easy to identify from the surface, right? But for this type of deployments, a false negative can create chaos once all the traffic gets migrated.
That's another like topic that we're trying to tackle in our organization. So I mean, one way would be start practicing your fault injection, chaos engineering mechanisms, so that you can simulate failure and really build and embed reliability in your systems. Um, Another way would be to so there are you could use machine learning services that would learn and automatically detect symptoms and detect these false negatives, as you say, from the noise, right? We're not there yet. We still have a long ways to go in improving what we have in our organization. But yeah, these are real world problems that need to be solved.
Good thoughts. Good thoughts. All right. Very interesting topics for tonight, guys. So, for the record, there's 90 participants in the room at this time since 7 p.m. So, that's a very good achievement for the participation rate. Now, last words, JR, for the community.
Yeah. No. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you for inviting me. Yeah, it's always good to share experiences and scars that I've incurred from from battles and then the customers that I've encountered. So yeah, thank you.
Nice. Thank you. So, I'm sharing my screen, and before we proceed to the raffle, here are some short announcements for the community.
All right, guys, while we're still preparing our last slides, for those asking where can we get the recording and the slides, so please keep updated on our Facebook user group, our website, and our meetup.com. Right, so there's a high, and also our YouTube. No, sorry. So the recording will be posted in YouTube as well. Normally it takes me the weekend to upload it. It's a long, it's a long video, no? And then for the copy of the slides, we'll coordinate, and most likely we'll also put that up by next week as well. All right, our host has dropped. I think maybe it's run out, or I know. But let's just give it a little while, no? But again, for those that still want to join the raffle for our hoodies, sponsored by Accenture.ph. Thank you, Accenture. No? They've always been a good friend of the AWS User Group. If you remember the blue shirt, that was actually sponsored also by Accenture back then, right? And our host is now back. Let us just promote him back to our host. Wait, where's our host? Alvin, are you now? There you are. I will now promote you back to host. Oh, stop moving. Promote to panelist. Here you go. Alvin, are you back? I saw your name. All right.
Sorry about that. Okay, back to the show. Um, Sharing my screen. So here are a few announcements that people in the community should be aware of. So first, major sponsor for tonight's session, Accenture. If you haven't taken the survey, take it now. Well, there still has a time for you to qualify for the hoodie. AWS Community ASEAN. So we'll have the blog live. I think it's already live. So we have here Jambi and Donnie on the front page. So
You know,
if you have interest, go Jambi.
yeah, Alvin. So yeah, let me take this this section to introduce the AWS Community ASEAN blog, right? So this is a
Go ahead.
collaboration between Donnie and and the AWS user group, right? So we started this blog, the AWS ASEAN Community blog, so you guys can have another avenue to contribute, no? So I know how it's like sometimes it can be a bit a bit heavy to to talk to volunteer yourself to talk to the to the AWS meetup. But if you want to start small, no, you can contribute by writing a blog first, testing out your ideas, and with the dev.to community, no, this is, dev.to is actually a website. So if you put it in your browser, it shows up a blogging website like medium.com, pero especially made for developers. So AWS and the user group decided to use that as a platform, right? So what you do there is you create your account in dev.to, and then you fill up a form. So we will send the mechanics naman in a separate post, and then you fill up that form, tapos you'll be able to join the organization na. So once you create your dev.to account, you fill up the form, you get the token, tapos you get that to join the organization, you can post blogs directly, right? Directly to the AWS community ASEAN, right? So syempre, there's a few ground rules lang for this. So it of course must be AWS related, yung blog post. It must be informative, no, and it's not completely selling things. It's also must be free from harassment or harming others, and it's not plagiarized, you know. But other than that, we have very light rules, so anyone can just come in and contribute. Tapos we will add you in the Facebook group as well, no? So you can share ideas with your co-contributors, no? And then as part of a incentive, no, to introduce this AWS blog, so the AWS has gladly sponsored some credits. So people who will contribute blogs, even it's not super technical, they will receive a 25 USD credits, right? So you can share your thoughts about AWS, your journey so far, ganyan. And if it's a technical blog, if it's a technical content that it has a hands-on step-by-step experience and showing how to use AWS services, ganyan, we are willing to give that 50 USD, you know. So that's something that we'll have to communicate lang, tapos let us know na ito yung blog idea nyo. And then ano naman, everything is in the post, we'll post that tomorrow. So this is the soft launch of the AWS blog, no? AWS community blog, right? So just one thing before I go back to Alvin, you know. So people are scared to contribute to the community, you know, kasi oh my god, baka I don't know enough, right? Or maybe I do something wrong, right? But I think it's okay to start as early as now, kasi our journeys are unique, no? Wherever you are in your journey, even if you're just starting, when you write something like this, you contribute to the blog or speak to the AWS meetups or volunteer, you're helping people behind you in the journey, right? So it's only like right now na parang okay, ito yung pinakaalam mo how you pinakaalam mo how they struggle, right? So you are in the position to help them the most, right? Lalo na yung mga few steps behind you, ganyan. So you don't have to wait until you're super god level in AWS to contribute, right? You can contribute right now with your skill and with your skill level and with your journey in AWS. So yun, that's all lang. Thank you for giving me the time, Alwin, and for the user group support. No, yeah.
Thank you, Jambi, for that introduction to the AWS Community ASEAN blog. Moving on, we have the Getting Started with Amazon SageMaker workshop. So please take note of the link. I'll pause for a while. So it's https Amazon SageMaker workshop dot splashdot.com. It's on April 23rd. That's tomorrow. So what time is set to this? 23rd. Is this US time, PH time? Rafi, do you know?
I think it's GMT plus 8. Since it's a CN, no? I'm not. We'll just have to check the link itself.
Okay, thank you. Now, next is this was advertised earlier. Register now for free AWS CCP tutor group. Visit the Facebook page for further announcement. Now, another one is the Tech Week for 2021, Building Skills, Better Careers through Tech Community, which will be held on May 17 to 21. So reserve your slot. It's https://techweek.phtechcommunity.org. Then we have the upcoming AWS Summit Online for ASEAN. We have few people who will represent the AWS Community PH, so let's support them. Let's join their session and participate in other sessions. We have first one, Rafael Dabalos, that's Jambi. The topic he'll be discussing is load testing integration with Apache JMeter and AWS Code Pipeline. So it's for the So if you haven't registered, do it now. Next one is machine learning engineering with the power of Amazon SageMaker, still an advanced level. It will be facilitated by Joshua Arvidlat, our ML hero for PH. Next one is a panel discussion, building your developer journey with AWS. It's an introductory, but the speakers in this panel are heavyweights, and we have our very own Rafael Francis Sumbing, our AWS community hero. And for May, the topic is AWS data and analytics. So stay tuned for the announcement of the speakers and the topics that they will be presenting. And again, if you have interesting topics that you can share to the community, reach out to us and any of the AWS leaders. So Rafi, raffle time.
All right, thank you guys.
I'll stop sharing the screen.
Right. So for the raffle time, let me just see now. All right. So for raffle time, I've been advised by our partner that we actually cannot share the actual raffle itself due to data privacy reasons, right? Since that's their sheet. However, I have seen the raffle results, including how they raffled it, and I can verify it's really truly random using wheels of name, right? So if you're familiar with wheels of name, you just have a very big circle where you spin, and the following people are the winners. No? So if you can just verify that you're still here, the following people so that we can easily contact you. We have our first winner is Lester Acorda. If you're here, can you raise your hand? Are you still here, Lester? Ayun, yes. All right. Thank you, Lester. Our next winner is Clarence Adviento. Okay, Clarence Adviento. You're also here. Raise your hand. All right. Congrats on the. No, maybe we can show the jacket. What they're winning now. Can you somebody share that screen? On the jacket itself. Or can you open like maybe store.aws.ug.ph? Para lang the rest of the people know what they have won as well. Yan, no? So this is the prize thanks to Accenture. I'm trying to see if we can give out more, but for now, since we mentioned that the three winners, and the last winner so far is Lervin Abando. Okay, Lervin, are you here? Please raise your hand if you're here. All right, so all three participants are still here. Congratulations on winning and AWS User Group PH hoodie. Right, and so that's it for this evening. Thank you again to our great host and all the user group leaders as well. And again, if you missed or some of the links are hard to remember, no, always remember that we have our website, AWSUG.PH. All information are also found there. So information on the next events, information on our leaders, information on how to volunteer, how to sponsor, AWSUG.PH. So thank you everyone and good night.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thank you for your time. Hope
Thank you.
enjoyed
Thank you,
learned
everyone.
a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you rin to our speakers, no?
Yes, thank you to our amazing speakers. Ano, parang nagka-goosebumps ako sa topics nila and sa pag-deliver. Amazing talaga.
Yeah.
Amazing. Nangabigatin din yung speaker natin today, sir.
Oo nga. JR na lang yun na dito. So, thank you dun kay Chelly. Please send our thanks. Gambi.
Yes,
Ren.
thanks din ako sa kanya. Medyo ano rin yun, busy person din yun. Na ano rin, at least na find the time siya.
Yes, nahatak.
Yun nga. And sakto rin yung topic. Marami siyang gano'n na-encounter rin sa ECD.
Great. Alright guys, thank you. Anyway, if you have kung gusto nyo lang makipag-chat or what, yeah, you can also put more Q&A. No? Tingnan ko lang itong Q&A. How do you maintain your Terraform scripts to keep it dry and maintainable if you have a separate dev, QA, and prod environment? Oh guys, sinong nagte-Terraform dyan? Sinong willing mag-answer?
Terraform modules, TerraGrant.
TerraGrant daw. Oh.
I'll be signing off. Thank you guys. Good evening.
Thank you and good evening also. Yeah, so yun daw, look at TerraGrant. No? Although hindi ako nagte-Terraform, but try looking at nested stacks for cloud formation naman.
So Terraform, if it's applicable, you can also use Terraform Workspace to separate dev, QA, and prod environments.
Oy, thank you, Chai. Nandito ka pala, Chai. Hindi ko napansin. Si Ma'am Chai, very supportive yan.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Okay, end natin yung call, guys.
Sige, sir.
Okay.
Pag-din na lang tayo eh.
Yes.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you sa time niyo.
Thank you. End ka na rin. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.